I would go to Pakistan, yeah. Pakistan has been great. They've been so good. Islamabad, I might go. Yeah, I might go. If the deal is signed in Islamabad, I might go. The field marshal has been great. The prime minister has been really great in Pakistan. So I might go.
President Trump telling reporters he'd go to Pakistan himself to seal the deal with Iran ahead of a potential next round of negotiations, which is coming this weekend. Now, this after the president formally announced a 10-day ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, inviting both sides to the White House for further talks. President saying this on Truth Social, quote, "I hope Hezbollah acts nicely and well during this important period of time. It will be a great moment for them if they do. No more killing, must finally have peace." I want to bring in Heritage Senior Research Fellow Steve Yates. Steve, you think Hezbollah is going to be nice?
I would never assume that. After all, given the nature of that regime and all the death, destruction, disruption they've given over so long. However, I think the president has done all the right things to get the government of Israel and government of Lebanon on the same side, and maybe a little bit more of the world seeing Hezbollah for what it is, and that it's ultimately a threat to Lebanon. And so we are, I think, in the right place to try to contain that malign influence. The Iranians tried to use that as another point of leverage, which sort of was an admission that Hezbollah is an extension of them that mattered to the remnants of this regime that is seemingly on its last legs in Tehran. So I think that it's an uncertain thing. We can never. It's more in the category of don't trust, just verify.
Well, and that's the question mark, I think, here, is that if you've got this economic pressure, you've got the blockade in place, of course, which stifles their economy, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars a day that they're losing, according to one report this week. How does that affect their ability to fund the proxies? Or, Steve, has that funding already gone to the proxies, not just, I'm thinking about Hezbollah, but also the Houthis?
It takes a while to be able to track where the funding has gone and whether that's sort of temporary adjustments or it's a strategic choice that this is now cut off. The tools that have been opened up to the Secretary of Treasury are unprecedented in the sense that since 9/11, this is probably the widest aperture, and part of that is because the Iranians attacked, I think, very non-strategically a lot of our Arab allies, and what that did was make them willing to open up their financial systems to American tools. We have economic nuclear weapons, just like we have military nuclear weapons. And I think that the access to the international financial system, the forensic access to those accounts, helps us really get at where are these funds and how do we stop them.
Yeah, even if it's in Bitcoin?
Well, that is a world that I can't say that I fully understand how it's controlled. But I think what we do is just follow stoicism, control the things we know we can control.
Understood, Steve. No, I understand. And I agree with you. The tools that the Treasury Secretary have been given have been nothing short of phenomenal to track the money. And speaking of Scott Bessent, he put Chinese banks on notice, warning they're going to face secondary sanctions if Iranian money is seen flowing through their system. Watch this.
2 Chinese banks received letters from the U.S. Treasury. I'm not going to identify the banks, but we told them that if we can prove that there is Iranian money flowing through your accounts, then we are willing to put on secondary sanctions.
And President Trump told Maria earlier this week that Xi Jinping wrote him a letter that China was not aiding Iran in the conflict. Fox News has confirmed the contrary, that Iran used a Chinese spy satellite to target American military bases across the Middle East. There are leaked documents showing the IRGC purchased the satellite in 2024 after it was launched into space by China. This allows Iran to capture images of major U.S. bases in Saudi Arabia and Jordan. Steve, to be clear, that is before the much of the Iranian leadership was taken out by the U.S. military.
Yeah, well, it's, as former Secretary Don Rumsfeld might say, a known that China has been helping the likes of Russia and Iran. They are core partners of this supposed BRICS alternative to American leadership and allies around the world. And I think it's super important that people like Secretary Bessent and other members of the cabinet bring the president evidence of, it's one thing what other leaders say, and the president wasn't born yesterday. He knows that people will say things to him that are meant to influence more than to inform, and foreign leaders, especially especially so. But he can say what he wants to shape the environment for negotiations, but he wants to have in his pocket the evidence of, I know what you did last summer, and be able to have credible action taken. And Secretary Bessent is putting those options on the table, and he's right. We did this with the North Korean negotiations 20+ years ago, where they were saying that there wasn't help there, but we had forensic evidence, and we put some banks in China on notice of being primary money laundering concerns, and that was leverage used to try to move those negotiations forward.
You know, Chris Johnson says, I mean, Chris, the question mark here now especially is because of this upcoming meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping. And that's why that was, I thought, a very important part of the Maria interview with him, that those conversations are happening, whether or not the president goes to China. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think it would be a huge risk for the president to go to China and meet with Xi, especially in the midst of this conflict. And so I think Steve's right that it is a known that China is playing a role in this conflict. And so unless there is an intention to make sure that China is not actively engaged in this and not supporting our enemies in Iran, this meeting is a non-starter in a lot of ways.
And, you know, Steve, final word to you. The Chinese have more to lose than anyone here on a global scale because of the amount of oil that they import from Iran, which has now been shut off for a week. And I think people forget how quickly those supplies are burned through at refineries around the world. You know, a week of a blockade is an incredible hit to the Chinese.
For sure it is, and it's going to be one where there'll be a little bit of a delayed sonic boom for them. It's not just right now. It's going to linger longer. And so I think that whether it's by intent or just by luck going through this process, the president really has exposed some big vulnerabilities China has. They have complete dependency on access to the world's largest consumer market, us. President Trump knows that, and he's adjusted policy accordingly. They are very dependent on imported oil and gas from the Middle East. And the president now has made that very clear to everyone. It should be clear to the leaders in Beijing and their followers. And I think that puts the lie to the notion that America's on decline and China's on the inevitable rise. We're on top right now, and we aim to stay that way. And we're kind enough to negotiate with you some kind of fair peace. But we're not going to be taken advantage of. And I think that puts the president in the best possible position.
When he sat down with Maria this week, he said the same thing he said, look, this will include China. If you help the Iranians, I will throw tariffs on you. And that threat is real. Steve Yates, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back, everybody.